The marsh pulsed with life, a cacophony of bird cries filling the air in a relentless symphony of chaos. Each call overlapped the next, rising and falling in an unpredictable rhythm that drowned out all other sounds. The air was heavy, laden with the oppressive weight of humidity. White fireflies flickered faintly on the periphery, their golden glow adding an ethereal touch to the dense living world. The clearing, illuminated by the soft otherworldly light, seemed to exist in liminal space, caught between the real and the surreal. Zephyr stood motionless in the clearing, his wings tucked close to his body. His amber eyes scanned the horizon, their intensity cutting through the shifting reeds and shimmering haze of the marsh. The cries of the birds seemed to envelop him, yet he remained calm, grounded amidst the symphony of chaos. To spawn in meta, he murmured, his voice steady. A true action. He paused, his gaze sharpening as the weight of understanding settled on his shoulders. One must question with the divine. His tone carried reverence, each word deliberate, as though spoken not just to himself, but to the marsh itself. He smiled faintly, a flicker of clarity crossing his lips. One must be focused on the current state of the all. His wings shifted slightly, a faint rustle breaking the stillness around him. I finally come to learn of the hunt. As if responding to his words, the marsh suddenly stilled. The deafening cries of the birds ceased, plunging the clearing into a silence so complete it felt suffocating. Zephyr's senses sharpened, his breath steady as his gaze flicked to the ground. There, nestled in the grass, a dice began to tremble violently, emitting faint, incomprehensible whispers. It shimmered, shifting and twisting until it transformed, giving way to a figure. Haze emerged, his lithe form exuding an air of playful menace. A brown fox draped in black robes, his fur rippled like liquid shadows caught in perpetual motion, especially around his eyes, which flickered and shifted with an unnatural darkness. His grin was sly, his tone equally so as he spoke. Good, he said, his voice carrying a strange blend of amusement and ominous intent. Me and Tomodile have been expecting you. Zephyr crossed his arms, his posture firm. You best have knowledge for me, he said, his tone unyielding. Hayes chuckled, his grin widening. Of course. He stepped forward, the ground beneath him rippling as if in submission. Spawning, he began, his voice deepening. Recall there is a fundamental principle to it. There is something that wasn't there before. He gestured vaguely toward the marsh. His movements were fluid. You know the rules. Zephyr nodded, his gaze unwavering. I do. His voice carried resolve, his stance betraying no hesitation. Tomodile, first question. The earth beneath them trembled, the mud shifting and swirling like a living thing. Slowly a massive form emerged, a green crocodile, its scales glistening with moisture, its wide papery smile stretching unnervingly across its face. The creature's presence was as commanding as it was unsettling, its very aura an invitation to danger. Yes, go ahead, Tomodile hissed, his tone mockingly polite. Zephyr leaned forward slightly, his words carrying the weight of purpose. Who controls the web of myth, he asked, his voice steady, yet charged with curiosity. Tomodile laughed, a guttural, unnerving sound that seemed to reverberate through the marsh. That's a great question, he said, his tone turning philosophical. His eyes narrowed as if peering into a realm unseen, one that begins with purpose and aim, and virtue in a world built on pure chaos. The mud around them rippled and shifted, forming intricate patterns, webs of interconnected lines that pulsed with a faint energy. Here we must remember, Tomodile continued, that all cause has effect, but expansion holds no limits. That is the flow. Meta spawns forevermore. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. It never does so without energy in time. Zephyrus, there is so much more to explore. As his words faded, the ground shuddered violently. A fissure opened beneath Tomodile, the mud swallowing him whole. His unnerving grin lingered as he sank into the depths, leaving Zephyr standing alone in the clearing. The marsh began to spin, the world tilting into darkness as Zephyr was pulled into the void. Zephyr materialized on a staircase of materia, suspended in isolation above an unending bog. The air was thick with the pungent scent of decay, the atmosphere heavy and suffocating. Faint whispers echoed from the void below, haunting and incomprehensible, like fragments of forgotten thoughts. Zephyr's wings twitched slightly, his gaze scanning the endless stretch of the bog. Time is all we need for things to come together, he murmured. His voice was low. He took a step forward, the sound of his movement swallowed by the oppressive silence. And it passes slow, a tick-tocking of passing minutes. A bitter laugh escaped him, his fists clenching at his sides, long and drawn out. The slow burn of corruption, of rendered duration. He paused, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the endless expanse of the bog. There must be more to life than this, he said, his voice rising with frustration. How do I create more? In the distance, two cubes jutted from the mud, their surfaces flickering with eerie twin flames. One cube bore the alchemical symbol for air, glowing faintly, while the other projected the image of a shadow serpent, its movements causing ripples in the surrounding air. Zephyr's gaze fixed on them, his expression hardening with determination. Expansion of the heavenly lore, he said, his voice was steady. He took a step toward the cubes, each movement deliberate. Take the step and discover will. Discover what is behind that door. A towering marble leaf stretched skyward from the squishy mud, its surface glowing faintly as though imbued with otherworldly energy. Zephyr approached a dice block embedded in the ground, its edges trembling as if alive. He stepped onto it without hesitation. The dice began to rise, lifting him higher toward the apex of the marble leaf where a blue doorway shimmered faintly, waiting. As the dice slowed near the platform, Zephyr stepped off with purpose, his gaze locked on the doorway, his breath steady despite the tension that hung in the air. Deeper into scale, he said quietly. His voice was tinged with quiet resolve. A faint smile formed on his lips as he reached for the door. Okay, one more. The faint hum of energy surrounded him as he pushed open the door, the marsh falling away into darkness again.